The bernette 35 and the bernette 33 both have excellent stitches that you can use to overlock the edge of your fabrics. Hi, I'm Sarah from sewingmastery.com, where we do free video tutorials on sewing machines, sergers, and embroidery machines. So here we're going to explain which stitches that you can use to stop the edges of your fabric from unraveling. What we want to do is pick a stitch that will jump over the edge as it stitches and locks that from unraveling. Usually the unraveling happens after you handle the fabric a lot or once you start to wash it. So if you've ever found yourself washing your fabric or your garment or your pillowcases and all those frayed out edges, this is the answer. You can do it before you sew your pieces together, so you would overlock all the raw edges, then do your construction seams, or sometimes you can sew all your construction seams together first and go back and kind of overlock the edges. It could be done as simple as using a zigzag. So on the bernette 35, stitch letter B, and then on the bernette 33, stitch letter C, and then pick the width that you would need to use it for. You can use a regular foot and that's okay. I'm also going to show you a little cheat foot. This is actually the blind hem foot that comes with the bernette 35 and the bernette 33 that is adjustable. So you can actually adjust this so you have something to visualize and line up the edge of your fabric as you stitch the stitch. We do have in the optional accessory box of feet a true overlock foot. Now overlock foot has a little kind of pin that the stitch forms over so it doesn't roll your fabric. So as you're stitching on the fabric and then it jumps off, the tendency is that thread wants to make it kind of curl, especially if you're sewing on one layer of fabric. So that overlock foot is ideal because it will support the stitch and make it so your edges are nice and flat after you've overlocked them. Now I'm going to stop right here because we have actually done a whole series of free video tutorials on the bernette serger. So we'll put a link right up here where you can go over and find the playlist and check out what a serger actually does. Those stitches are so much more professional. It actually stitches much faster because as you'll notice once I pick my stitch, it's going to do stitch, stitch, jump, stitch, stitch, jump, stitch, stitch, jump. It's very slow, and it's not that it's slow, it's just that the sergers are so much faster because they just do it in one pass. There's also a knife that will even off maybe some edges that aren't totally clean, so that is something nice, and without changing anything, it can really do well on knit fabric. So if you've looked inside your t-shirts or your garments you've purchased, that stitch in there is the overlock stitch on a serger or an overlock machine. So it's meant to be a complement to a sewing machine. It doesn't replace it, but go check out those videos, see what a serger can do. It's more than just serging edges. Like I said, it makes knits and knit projects go so much faster and look so much more professional. But back to doing it on the sewing machine. I'm going to pick a couple stitches. We'll do some on some woven fabric and then also a little bit on the knit fabric as well. And using both the standard foot and the other blind hem foot. Again, not for its intended use, but I'm going to show you how you can do a little cheating with it. So what you're looking for is a stitch that will jump to the right. So F would be a great stitch. Now E is actually the blind hem stitch. That jumps to the left, so that is not what we're looking for. We're looking to stitches like F and G on the black top row, and any of these stitches that kind of jump off to the side like F and G on the red row. So if you are looking for the red stitches, remember you'll be turning the stitch length dial over to the red S, and it does have that little plus minus, so you're going to adjust it a little to the side or to the other side depending on how the stitch forms. It kind of has a back and forth, so you kind of want to kind of make sure that it is balanced, and that is how we can balance it, depending on what fabrics you're working on. Some fluffier fabrics, the stitch might be a little distorted, but you can go to the minus or the plus and get it to be either stretched out or a little bit better looking, depending on your results. Okay, so those would be options for you. I'm going to just start with, let's just start with F. So turn your stitch selection dial to F. I'm going to just leave it at 2.5. That's kind of where our default middle is that I always recommend for a straight stitch, but I'll adjust this as we start to sew. And if you do want it the widest setting, just leave it at 5 at this point here. And we're going to kind of be sewing kind of down the middle of our foot. So enough of the stitch goes on the fabric, but when it jumps to the right, it actually is going to jump into air. You don't want fabric anywhere near that needle as it jumps to the right. So I can see that these stitches are going down the fabric fairly quickly, so I'm going to shorten the stitch length. We're going to take it down, how about to 1.5? I'll show you the difference, and then I'll tell you what I'm looking for once I do a few stitches. While we're here, let me just jump over to stitch G, and we'll just leave it at the same stitch length and stitch width. And then let's go over to the red stitches and pick F and G, just to give you like a couple different varieties. And I hope that you'll do this too, where you can see which one you like and which one would be better for the fabric that you're actually working on. So F and G. All right, excellent. Needle stops up, take up lever at its highest position, and now we can take a look. So at the end, I was kind of doing a fun stitch here. That one works too. I do like this one. That one's nice. And the simple first one that we started with totally is going to do the job where it keeps the stitches and fabric from fraying out even more. When I started, there was a lot of gap in between when it jumped off the edge, so that's why I shortened it a little bit more. These little threads here are just from what I had before, but they're definitely not wanting to unravel any further. Let's do that real quick. I am going to pick I think I kind of like the F stitch in the black row. I'm going to shorten it just a little bit. We're going to switch out the feet. There's a lever in the back. When you touch it, the foot comes off. We have a whole video on like other feet, so you can click right up here and you can look and see what other options there are. And this one, so I mentioned it's adjustable, so as I twist this little guide moves in front of where the needle will be to be a little closer or further apart. So as I start to sew, that's when I'm really going to notice or get it set right. I'm going to lower the press foot down, clicks onto place. There is a groove for where the thread can go down the middle, and let's just turn the fabric around. We'll do this over here. So what I can do is set my fabric right up against that guide, and if I'm not close enough, I can see already I need to move it a little bit more to the right, and then I'll veer over there. Oh yes, and that sure makes it a lot easier than trying to guess where to follow. The foot is kind of doing that work for me. Now you're noticing, remember I was telling you there's like a place where it goes stitch, stitch over, stitch, stitch over. You can see that even at full speed, that it's going to take a while to get all the way to the end of my fabric, where if I was on a serger, we'd have already finished like 3 of these rows in that same amount of time or more. So let's just stop here just to show you the example of what that stitch looks like when it's a little bit closer. And being that I was following a guide, how much more even that stitch would be. Remember, we can do this on the edges of our fabric before we sew them together, or we can come back after we've put the, maybe the pair of shorts together or the pillowcase together, and then overlock the double edges for that. I'm going to do just a quick little bit where I'm going to take some ribbing. I'm going to cut a little curve, like a neckline, out of this knit fabric. And I'm going to show you how this stitch, without changing anything else, will be both an overlock stitch and a construction seam. So ribbing is usually folded in half. It can be stretched out to meet the curve that the fabric is. but because it has stitches that are straight and then the jump, it can be both a construction seam and an overlock stitch all at once. I'm going to make it a little longer since now I've got 3 layers of fabric going through here. And I'm going to stretch the knit fabric just a little bit as I sew, but I'm using the guide of the foot, the blind hem foot, to kind of bring all those layers together really easy in front of the needle stitching. Okay, check this out. After I cut the thread, you're gonna see we've got perfect even stitches. We have the stretch and give that we want, but look, we have a construction seam as well. So it sewed it, it overlocked it, and put it all together all at once. So that is super easy, great way. It's professional, and it overlocks that edge all in one stitch. So on the Bernette 35, that was stitch F in the top row, the black area, with a stitch length of 1.5. And if you're working with the Bernette 33, that will be your stitch G on the top row, doing the exact same thing. Turn the stitch dial to G and stitch length anywhere from 1.5 to 2, somewhere in that range would be perfect. If this information was helpful, make sure you're clicking like on our videos. Each time you watch them, that's the courtesy to say thank you for the free information. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and if you're looking for all the free video tutorials on the Bernette 35 and the Bernette 33, we have a link to the playlist in the description below or right here at the end of the video, where you can start from the beginning and watch them all the way through. Happy sewing!